A brilliant lawyer, an enigmatic tycoon, an auction that hides dangerous secrets. Olivia Parker attended to observe but left entangled in a power game where every bid has a price. What does Theo Sullivan really want? And why does his past seem connected to hers? The ballroom of the Maximilian Hotel gleamed under the light of hundreds of crystals hanging from elaborate Venetian chandeliers. It was a special night, the most anticipated charity auction of the year, where society's elite gathered not just to make million-dollar donations, but primarily to showcase their power and influence. Olivia Parker nervously adjusted the red dress that her best friend Beth had practically forced her to wear. "You need to get out of that crushing office routine," Beth had insisted, while practically dragging her to the most expensive dress shop in the city. "And don't give me that story about having cases to review. Even judges take vacations, Olivia." Now, standing near one of the enormous windows that opened onto the hotel's illuminated gardens, Olivia questioned her decision to attend. As a lawyer specializing in corporate law, she was accustomed to dealing with the country's business elite, but always in a professional context, protected by the formality of her suit and the security of her desk. Here, exposed in this dress, that revealed more than it covered, she felt vulnerable. "Miss Parker," a deep, melodious voice made her turn. "Forgive my intrusion, but I couldn't help noticing that you seem as out of place as I am in this social circus." The man addressing her was tall, with broad shoulders perfectly outlined by a tuxedo that seemed to have been sewn directly onto his body. His eyes, a deep and unsettling green, shone with a mixture of amusement and something else, something dangerous that made Olivia's heart instantly race. "Theo Sullivan," he introduced himself, extending a champagne flute to her. "And, before you ask, yes, I am that Sullivan you've probably heard about in the financial news." Olivia accepted the glass, allowing her fingers to brush lightly against his during the exchange. An electric current seemed to run down her spine at the brief contact. Of course, she knew him. Theo Sullivan was practically a legend in the corporate world, heir to an empire built by his grandfather and multiplied by his own hands through business strategies that many considered controversial at best. "Olivia Parker," she responded, maintaining the professional tone that had always protected her in uncomfortable situations. "And yes, I'm also that Parker from the Goldstein versus National Confederation of Industry case." A surprised smile illuminated Theo's face. "The lawyer who managed to reverse the Supreme Court's decision in favor of small business owners. Impressive. I confess your name has crossed my desk a few times. We even considered hiring your services." "And why didn't you?" "Conflict of interest," he replied, his smile taking on a darker tone. "You represent exactly the type of person who usually sues us." There was something magnetic about the way he spoke, as if each word was carefully chosen to provoke a reaction. Olivia found herself studying the contours of his face, the way his jaw tensed slightly before each phrase, the way his eyes never left hers, as if they were engaged in a silent battle. "So you admit that your company has questionable practices?" she provoked, surprising herself with her boldness. Theo took a step towards her, dangerously reducing the space between them. "I admit that in the business world, sometimes it's necessary to make difficult decisions. But something tells me you understand that well, don't you, Miss Parker? After all, not all of your clients are exactly saints." The comment caught her off guard. How did he know about her other clients? The information about her portfolio was strictly confidential. Before she could question him, a commotion in the center of the ballroom announced the start of the auction. "How about we make this evening more interesting?" Theo proposed, his eyes shining with a veiled challenge. "A small bet. If I win the most valuable item of the night, you agree to have dinner with me tomorrow. And if you lose?" "Impossible. I never lose, Miss Parker. But if it makes you feel more secure, you can name your price." Olivia knew she should refuse. All her professional experience screamed that getting involved with Theo Sullivan was a colossal mistake. He represented everything she fought against in her career. The unbridled power of large corporations, the arrogance of billionaires who thought they were above the law. But there was something about him, something that made her usual caution dissolve like ice in hot water. "If you lose," she finally responded, "I want access to Sullivan Holdings records on the Southern Miners case. No intermediaries, no lawyers, just the original documents." Theo's smile widened, transforming into something almost predatory. "Interesting. Using a charity event to get privileged information? Perhaps you're not so different from me as you think, Miss Parker." "The difference, Mr. Sullivan, is that I use information to help people, not to crush them." "We'll see," he murmured, his eyes fixed on hers as the first item was announced. "We'll see." The auction proceeded at a frenzied pace. Rare works of art, historic jewels, and exclusive experiences were fought over by the present elite. Olivia watched, fascinated, as Theo participated strategically, letting others bid higher on less significant items, only to enter at the crucial moment with offers impossible to be surpassed. The last item of the night was announced, a set of recently discovered historical documents dated from the colonial period, with information about old land grants and mineral rights. The starting bid was astronomical, but Theo's eyes shone with an interest that went beyond simple competition. "5 million, he declared, before the auctioneer even finished the presentation. The room fell silent. No one expected such an aggressive bid right from the start. But then a voice rose from the back of the room. 6 million. Olivia saw Theo's jaw clench. The new participant was an older man, with graying hair and an impeccable suit that screamed old money. The tension between the two was palpable, as if that bid was just the surface of a much deeper rivalry. 10 million, Theo countered, his voice maintaining a studied calm that didn't reach his eyes. 15 million, the man responded almost immediately. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. That value was absurd even for a charity auction. Olivia could sense that there was more at stake, something she couldn't fully comprehend. Theo stepped forward, his eyes fixed on his opponent. 20 million, he declared, and the majority stake in South Marina. A murmur ran through the room. South Marina was one of the most disputed projects of the moment, a prime waterfront area that several developers had been trying to control for years. Offering this in a bid was more than generosity. It was a demonstration of absolute power. The older man visibly paled. After a few seconds of tension, he slightly inclined his head in a gesture of defeat and left the room. The auctioneer, still stunned by the value, declared Theo the winner. "I think I won our little bet." Theo turned to Olivia, his smile now carrying an intensity that made her shiver. "Dinner tomorrow at 8, I'll send a car to pick you up." "That was an unnecessary display of power," she commented, trying to keep her voice steady. "On the contrary, darling," he replied, coming so close that she could feel the heat of his body. "It was extremely necessary. There are things at stake that you can't even imagine." And now he brushed his lips lightly against her ear. "You're part of them." Before Olivia could respond, Theo moved away, mingling with the crowd that surrounded him to congratulate him on the winning bid. She stood there, feeling her heart hammer against her chest, with the certainty that she had just gotten involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple bet at a charity auction. What Olivia didn't know was that this night, seemingly glamorous and innocent, was just the first step in a web of events that would change her life forever. As she watched Theo Sullivan walk away, she couldn't imagine that the real auction, the one that would decide her fate, was just beginning. The law office was buzzing with the usual Monday morning agitation, but Olivia could barely concentrate on the cases piled on her desk. Her mind insisted on reliving every moment of the previous night, every word exchanged with Theo Sullivan. The mystery surrounding the historical documents from the auction and the visceral reaction of the older man intrigued her deeply. "You won't believe what's in the newspapers," Beth burst into her office, tablet in hand. Theo Sullivan not only won those old documents for a fortune, but apparently they have some connection to old territorial disputes. Sullivan Holdings stocks skyrocketed this morning. Olivia took the tablet, her eyes quickly scanning the article. The report speculated about the strategic value of the documents, suggesting that they could redefine property rights in regions currently disputed by large corporations. "And there's more," Beth continued, leaning over the desk with that gossip gleam in her eyes. That gentleman who competed with him at the auction. It's Richard Anderson from Anderson Mining. They say he left the event furious. The name made Olivia freeze. Anderson Mining was one of the companies involved in the Southern Miners case, exactly the process she had mentioned in her bet with Theo. The coincidence was too disturbing to be ignored. "Are you sure you're still going to dinner with him?" "Tonight?" Beth asked, her voice now laden with concern. "Theo Sullivan has a complicated reputation with women. They say he never gets involved for more than one night. It's just a business dinner," Olivia responded automatically, although she knew she was lying to herself. What had happened the night before had been anything but professional. The rest of the day dragged on in a succession of meetings and phone calls. But Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to enter dangerously deep waters. At 7:30 sharp, her secretary informed her that a limousine was waiting for her at the building's entrance. The vehicle was an obscene display of luxury, with an Italian leather interior and a bar stocked with drinks that probably cost more than her monthly salary. The driver took her for about 40 minutes, leaving the city center behind and following a private road that wound through a preserved forest area. The Sullivan mansion appeared like an apparition, its contemporary lines blending perfectly with the surrounding nature. There were no other cars in sight, no sign of the typical ostentation of high society parties. Olivia's heart accelerated when she realized it would be an intimate dinner. Theo was waiting for her at the top of the marble staircase, wearing a navy blue suit that seemed to have been made by the gods of tailoring. His smile when he saw her get out of the car had something predatory about it. "Miss Parker," he greeted her, descending the steps to offer her his arm. "Or can I call you Olivia, considering we're not in a professional environment?" "That depends," she replied, accepting the offered support. "Are we going to discuss business tonight?" "Among other things," he chuckled softly, guiding her into the mansion. "I have to admit that your little provocation about the miners case left me curious. It's not every day that someone challenges me so openly." The interior of the house was a study in luxurious minimalism, with carefully selected contemporary artworks adorning the white walls. Theo led her through several rooms until they reached a covered terrace overlooking the illuminated gardens. A table for two was elegantly set, candles flickering softly in the night breeze. Herr Sommelier waited discreetly with a bottle of wine, while a chef was finishing the last details of what promised to be an extraordinary dinner. "Impressed?" Theo asked, pulling out the chair for her. "Trying to intimidate me with all this luxury, Mr. Sullivan?" "Theo," he corrected, sitting across from her. "And no, I'm not trying to intimidate you. I'm trying to seduce you." The frankness of the statement caught her off guard. Olivia felt her face heat up, mentally thanking the soft lighting that disguised her blush. "And why do you think that would work?" she challenged, keeping her tone controlled as the sommelier poured the wine. "Because you're here," he answered simply. "Because despite all your professional pose and your admirable principles, something in you responded to the danger I represent. You could have refused the bet, could have ignored my invitation. But here you are, curious to discover where this will lead." The first course was served, a culinary work of art that Olivia barely registered, hypnotized by the intensity of Theo's gaze. "Maybe I'm here for the documents on the miners case," she suggested, tasting the wine to buy time. "We both know it's not just that." Theo leaned forward, lowering his voice. "But since you brought it up, how about a deal? You tell me what you really want to know about the case, and I'll consider opening my files." "Why would you do that?" "Because you intrigue me, Olivia Parker. You have access to information that few have, represent clients who theoretically should be my enemies and yet maintain an impeccable reputation. Nobody achieves that without having their own secrets." The conversation flowed during dinner, a game of cat and mouse where each answer led to more questions. Theo was a master at revealing small fragments of information that only served to increase the mystery. He talked about future projects of Sullivan Holdings, controversial decisions he had made, even about his complicated relationship with his grandfather, but always leaving strategic gaps in his narrative. "The documents I bought yesterday," he commented as they savored dessert, "are more valuable than Richard Anderson imagines. He thinks they're just records of old concessions, but there's something more there. something that can change the game completely. And does this have anything to do with the miners' case? It has to do with everything, darling. Theo smiled enigmatically. Every piece of the puzzle is connected. We just need to know how to fit them together. After dinner, he invited her to see his private library, an impressive environment with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with rare volumes and first editions. On a side table, protected by a glass dome, were the auction documents. "Want to take a look?" he offered, observing her interest. "You trust me with such valuable documents?" "No," he laughed, approaching from behind her. "I don't trust anyone, but sometimes we need to take calculated risks to get what we want." The heat of his body against her back was disturbing, as was the masculine perfume that invaded her senses. Olivia knew she should keep her distance, maintain professionalism, but something stronger impelled her to approach the danger that Theo represented. "And what exactly do you want, Theo?" she asked, turning to face him. At this moment, his green eyes darkened dangerously. This. The kiss was explosive, a collision of desire and power that made the world around them disappear. Theo's hands were possessive on her waist, his body pressing hers against the bookshelf. Olivia felt all her resistance melt under the heat of that contact, her own hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally separated, breathless, Theo kept his forehead pressed against hers. "You have no idea what you've started." "Olivia," he murmured, but now it's too late to turn back. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made them quickly move apart. A man in a dark suit, whom Olivia recognized as one of the mansion's security guards, appeared at the door. "Mr. Sullivan," he said urgently, "there's been an attempted breach of the company's system. Someone is trying to access the South Marina. Project files." Theo's face instantly hardened, all the passion of the previous moment giving way to a mask of calculated coldness. "I'm sorry, darling, but I'll have to cut our night short. Jenkins will take you home." "Theo, wait," Olivia held him by the arm. "Does this have anything to do with yesterday's auction?" "It has something to do with everything," he answered enigmatically. "And that's why I need you to stay away from this, for now." Before she could protest, he kissed her again, a quick but intense kiss that promised much more. "We'll continue this conversation soon," he promised, already heading for the door. "And Olivia, don't try to investigate this on your own. There are things at stake that you're not ready to understand yet." The journey back home was a whirlwind of contradictory thoughts and emotions. Olivia knew she was getting involved in something potentially dangerous, but she couldn't ignore the magnetic attraction she felt towards Theo, nor the curiosity about the mysteries that surrounded him. When she arrived at her apartment, she found an envelope on her bed. Inside it was a single sheet of paper with geographic coordinates and a cryptic message. "Not everything the Sullivans own was legitimately acquired. Ask about Isabella." The name made her blood run cold. Isabella was her mother's name. Olivia spent the night sleepless, her mother's name echoing in her mind like a distant bell. Isabella Parker had disappeared 20 years ago, leaving only an enigmatic letter that spoke of difficult choices and secrets that needed to be kept. Now that mysterious envelope suggested a connection between her disappearance and the Sullivan Empire. The next morning, deliberately ignoring Theo's warning, Olivia began her investigation. Her first stop was the Municipal Public Archive, where old documents were kept. Using her lawyer credentials, she gained access to the restricted section. "Miss Parker?" an elderly voice called out as she examined property records from the 1990s. It was Mrs. Carmen, the chief archivist who had worked there for over 3 decades. "What a coincidence to find you here. I just organized some documents that mention your mother." Olivia's heart raced. "My mother? What kind of documents?" "Old employment records. Did you know she worked for the Sullivans? She was the personal secretary to old Anthony Sullivan before he transferred control of the company to his grandson." The revelation hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. Her mother had never mentioned this connection. In fact, Isabella rarely talked about her work, always changing the subject when questioned. "For how long did she work there?" "Let me see." Mrs. Carmen consulted a file on her computer. From 1995 to 2003, she left a few months before, well, you know. Olivia did the math mentally. The period coincided exactly with the most controversial years of Sullivan Holdings' expansion, when the company had acquired vast tracts of land under questionable circumstances. Mrs. Carmen, I need to see those records. Of course, dear. But it's strange. Someone else asked to consult them yesterday. A very elegant man said he worked for the Sullivans. Before Olivia could process this information, her cell phone vibrated with a message from Theo. We need to talk, now. She ignored the message, focusing on the documents Mrs. Carmen was bringing. They were mainly payment records and routine administrative documents, but one detail caught her attention. Her mother had received a substantial transfer 2 weeks before she disappeared. Mrs. Carmen, is there any record of what exactly my mother did for the Sullivans? The archivist hesitated, a flash of concern crossing her wrinkled face. Technically, she was an executive secretary, but there were rumors. Anthony Sullivan trusted her a lot, maybe more than he should have. She had access to information that no one else had. The cell phone vibrated again, this time with a call from Beth. Olivia, where are you? There are 2 men here at the office looking for you. They say it's about an audit at Sullivan Holdings. Don't tell them where I am, Olivia responded quickly. In fact, don't tell anyone. Her hands were shaking as she quickly photographed the documents. Something here didn't make sense. Why had her mother never mentioned this job? And why, after so many years, were different people suddenly interested in these records? As she left the archive, Olivia noticed a black car parked across the street. The driver was talking on the phone, but his eyes were fixed on her. It wasn't paranoia, she was being followed. Using her skills as a lawyer specialized in strategic escapes from endless meetings, Olivia managed to lose the follower through a series of alleys and commercial establishments. She ended up taking refuge in an isolated cafe, where she finally had time to examine the photos she had taken more closely. Among the administrative documents, there was something that had initially seemed irrelevant. A request for access to the company's vault room, signed by Isabella Parker, dated 1 week before her disappearance. The stated reason was verification. Airvold Deeds, Deep Waters Project. Olivia frowned. Deep Waters. Where had she heard that name before? Then she remembered. It was what the South Marina project was originally called, the same one Theo had offered at the auction. Her cell phone vibrated for the 3rd time. It was a message from an unknown number. Your mother knew too much. Now you're following in her footsteps. There's still time to back off. A shiver ran down her spine. The veiled threat was clear. But instead of fear, Olivia felt a growing determination. After 20 years, there was finally a clue about her mother's disappearance. Determined to see this through, she typed a response to Theo. Meet me in an hour at the Antique Cafe. Come. Alone. We need to talk about Isabella Parker. The response was immediate. Don't move, I'm on my way. The Antique Cafe was a peculiar establishment, decorated with old clocks and Victorian furniture. Olivia chose a table in the back, from where she could observe both the entrance and the emergency exit. 20 minutes later, Theo walked through the door. He looked different from the seductive man of the previous night. His face was tense, his green eyes carrying a seriousness she had never seen before. How did you find out? He asked without preamble, sitting across from her. So you knew about my mother? Not until last night. Theo ran his hand through his hair in a gesture of genuine frustration. When you mentioned the miners' case, something bothered me. I had a deeper background check done and, well, here we are. Why did my mother receive $500,000 2 weeks before she disappeared? The question caught Theo by surprise. What are you talking about? Olivia slid her cell phone across the table, showing the photo of the transfer record. Theo examined the document, his expression subtly changing. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. According to the company records, your mother resigned normally. There was no extra payment. Then why does this record exist? And why was she investigating the Deep Waters project? Theo's face visibly paled. How do you know about that? I found a request for access to the vault room. What exactly was this project, Theo? And what connection does it have to South Marina? Before he could answer, the sound of breaking glass made them both turn. One of the waiters had dropped a tray, but something about the incident seemed to alarm Theo. "We need to get out of here, now." He grabbed Olivia's arm, pulling her towards the emergency exit. "What's happening?" "That's not a real waiter, and there are at least 3 men outside waiting for us." They had barely reached the door when the sound of hurried footsteps echoed behind them. Theo pushed her through the exit, guiding her through a maze of alleys and narrow passages. "Who are they?" Olivia asked as they ran. "Probably Richard Anderson's men, but they could be others. There are more people interested in these documents than you can imagine." They emerged on a busy street, where a sports bike was parked. Theo pulled a key from his pocket. "Get on," he ordered, starting the engine. "You planned this." "I always have a plan B," he smiled, that dangerous gleam returning to his eyes. "And a plan C, D, and E. Now get on, unless you want to find out what happens in plan F." Olivia hesitated, for only a second before getting on the bike. Theo accelerated at the exact moment 2 men in suits appeared in the alley they had just left. As they cut through traffic at high speed, Olivia clung to Theo's waist, her mind spinning with the day's revelations. Her mother, the Sullivans, the Deep Waters Project, all the pieces were connected, but the complete picture was still a mystery. "Where are we going?" she shouted against the wind. "To the only safe place now," Theo responded. "My grandfather's old house. It's time for you to learn the true story of the Sullivans." What Olivia didn't know was that this story was about to reveal secrets that would change not only her life, but the entire balance of power that sustained the Sullivan Empire. The old Sullivan mansion stood imposingly on top of a hill, its classic lines contrasting with the modernity of the city sprawling in the distance. Theo guided the motorcycle along a private road that wound between century-old trees, finally stopping in front of an ivy-covered wrought iron gate. "Nobody comes here since my grandfather moved to the country house," he explained, typing a code into a discreet panel, "except for the maintenance team once a month." The gate opened with a creak, revealing a stone path that led to the mansion. Gardens once meticulously cared for now exhibited an air of controlled abandonment, as if nature was slowly reclaiming its territory. "Why did you bring me here?" Olivia asked as they climbed the entrance steps. "Because this house holds more secrets than a confessional," Theo replied, unlocking the heavy oak door. "And because your mother spent a lot of time here." The interior of the mansion was like a time capsule, preserving the opulence of a bygone era. Furniture covered by white. Sheets created ghostly silhouettes in the spacious rooms. The air had that peculiar smell of long-closed places, mixed with the aroma of old wood and beeswax. Theo led her through several rooms until they reached an impressive library. Unlike the other rooms, this one seemed to have been used recently. There were no sheets covering the furniture, and a thin layer of dust on the mahogany desk suggested that someone had been there in the last few days. "My grandfather always said that true power isn't in money, but in information," Theo commented, heading to a specific bookshelf, and he kept his most valuable information here. With a precise movement, he pulled a specific book, a first edition of Machiavelli's The Prince. A soft click echoed through the library, and an entire section of the bookshelf slid to the side, revealing a secret room. "Impressive," Olivia murmured, following him into the hidden environment. The room was small but organized with military precision. Files occupied the walls, each drawer meticulously labeled. An antique desk dominated the center of the space, its surface covered with scattered papers and a modern laptop that seemed strangely out of place. "Someone's been here," Theo frowned, examining the papers. "These documents weren't like this the last time I came." "And when was that?" "Last night after you left. I came to look for information about your mother." Olivia approached the desk, her eyes catching details in the scattered documents. They were mainly old contracts and maps, some dating back to the early 20th century, but one particular envelope caught her attention. It had her mother's name, handwritten on it. Before she could reach for it, Theo stopped her. "Wait, we need to make sure it's safe." "What are you talking about?" "My grandfather was cautious. He used to set traps to protect important documents." "Let me check first." Theo carefully examined the envelope, using a small UV flashlight he took from his pocket. Satisfied that there was no security device, he handed it to Olivia. Inside was a letter, dated 1 week before Isabella's disappearance. Dear Anthony, the documents you asked me to verify revealed something you need to know. The Deep Waters project isn't just about South Marina. There's something much bigger involved. The coordinates I found in the old records point to a discovery that could change everything. But there are people who suspect. R.A. approached me yesterday, offered an absurd amount for the documents. Obviously I refused, but I'm worried. The threats have started, and we both know what he's capable of. I've taken the precautions we discussed. If anything happens to me, everything I've discovered is kept in a safe place. You'll know where to look when the time comes. Forgive me for involving Olivia in this, but I had no choice. One day she'll understand. With affection, Isabella. Olivia felt her legs weaken. Theo supported her, guiding her to a nearby chair. R.A. Richard Anderson, she murmured. He was involved in my mother's disappearance. Possibly, Theo replied, his voice tense. But that doesn't explain why she mentions you in the letter. You were, what, 10 years old at the time? 12, Olivia corrected automatically, her mind working furiously. And I don't remember anything that could... She stopped abruptly, a long-forgotten memory emerging. The necklace. What necklace? A week before she disappeared, my mother gave me an old necklace. She said it was a family heirloom and that I should keep it very carefully. I never understood why she insisted so much on this. Where is this necklace now? In my old room at my father's house. It's kept in a music box she also gave me at the same time. Olivia stood up, suddenly agitated. We need to go there. A noise coming from the library made them freeze. Footsteps. Someone else was in the house. Theo reacted instantly, turning off the flashlight and pulling Olivia behind a file cabinet. Seconds later, the light of a flashlight swept through the secret room. Are you sure they came here? A male voice asked. The motorcycle is outside, another voice replied. Keep looking. The boss wants those documents, and he wants the girl, too. Olivia felt Theo's arm tighten protectively around her waist. They were cornered in the secret room with only one exit, which was blocked by the intruders. Trust me, Theo whispered in her ear, so low she could barely hear him. Before she could respond, he reached for something under the old desk. There was a soft click, and suddenly the floor beneath their feet began to move. A trapdoor opened silently, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. The advantages of having a paranoid grandfather, Theo smiled, guiding her to the secret passage. He built escape routes throughout the house. They had barely closed the trapdoor when the flashlight beams illuminated the exact spot where they had been seconds before. In the darkness of the secret passage, Olivia could feel her heart beating violently against her chest. Where does this lead? She whispered. To the back garden, where I have a hidden car. But first, Theo stopped, gently holding her arms. I need you to understand something. From now on, there's no turning back. If we go after this necklace, if we discover what your mother hid, our lives will never be the same. My life already changed the moment you approached me at that auction, Olivia replied. Besides, after 20 years, I finally have a chance to find out what happened to my mother. I'm not giving up now. Even in the darkness, she could sense Theo's smile. That's why you fascinate me, Olivia Parker. You don't back down, no matter. The danger. I learned from my mother, she replied, her voice firm despite the fear. Now let's go get that necklace before they realize where we've gone. What they couldn't imagine was that the real danger wasn't in the men chasing them, but in the secrets that simple necklace held, secrets that had cost many lives and were about to come to light, forever changing the fate of two families. The car that Theo kept hidden in the back of the mansion was a discreet Audi, very different from the luxury vehicles he usually displayed. As he drove through the city streets, avoiding the main routes, Olivia noticed how his eyes constantly checked the rearview mirror. I got in touch with your father, he said after a few minutes of tense silence. He's not at home, but he authorized our entry. The caretaker will receive us. The house where Olivia grew up was in a traditional residential neighborhood. with old houses and leafy trees lining the sidewalks. As they approached, she noticed a disturbing detail. The garage door was ajar. "Something's wrong," Theo muttered, parking at a safe distance. "The caretaker should be waiting at the front door." They approached cautiously. The front door was also unlocked, and an abnormal silence hung over the house. There was no sign of the caretaker. "Stay close to me," Theo instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. The interior of the house was exactly as Olivia remembered, except for one crucial detail. The drawers in the living room were open, their contents hastily rummaged through. Someone had arrived first. "My room is on the second floor," she whispered, guiding Theo up the stairs. "The music box was—" Her voice faltered. The bedroom door was wide open, and the place looked like it had been the scene of a frantic search. Drawers pulled out, furniture out of place, even the ceiling lining had. Marks of having been checked. "No," Olivia ran to the closet, pushing aside clothes and boxes. "It has to be here." Amidst the chaos, her fingers found something familiar, a small music box made of carved wood. Her hands trembled as she opened it, fearing to find it empty. But the necklace was still there, apparently forgotten by the intruders. It was an old piece with an oval pendant decorated with intricate geometric patterns. "Let me see that," Theo asked, examining the object carefully. "These patterns, they're not just decorative, they look like—" "Coordinates," Olivia completed, recalling her geometry classes. "My mother was fascinated by mathematics. She always said numbers could tell stories if we knew how to interpret them." A noise downstairs made them freeze. Heavy footsteps were coming up the stairs. "We don't have much time," Theo whispered, taking out his cell phone. Quickly, he photographed the necklace from various angles. "We need to—" The sentence was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass in the next room. Someone was entering through the hallway window. "This way." Olivia grabbed Theo's hand, pulling him towards a side door that led to the attic. It was her secret hideout in childhood, a place that only she and her mother knew about. The space was cramped and dusty, but it offered an escape route through a skylight that gave access to the roof. As they squeezed into the dark place, they could hear voices approaching. "Search everything," a male voice ordered. "The necklace has to be here somewhere." "Sir, we found signs that someone was here recently." "Sullivan?" the first voice growled. "He's always one step ahead. Keep looking." In the darkness of the attic, Olivia felt Theo's arms wrap protectively around her. They were so close that she could feel his accelerated heartbeat against her back. "We need to create a distraction," he whispered in her ear. "Can you make it to the roof?" Olivia nodded. In her childhood, she had explored every inch of that roof, knew every loose tile, every safe foothold. Theo took something from his pocket. It looked like a small electronic device. With precise movements, he activated it and threw it through a crack in the floorboards. Seconds later, a series of smoke explosions filled the floor below. "Now!" he commanded. With surprising agility, Olivia pushed open the skylight and emerged onto the roof. The afternoon sun momentarily blinded her, but her feet automatically found the safe spots. Theo followed closely behind, closing the passage behind them. Below, they could hear the confusion caused by the smoke. It was their chance to escape. "There!" Theo pointed to a nearby tree whose branches almost touched the roof. "Can you reach it?" In response, Olivia was already moving. Years of secret practice in her adolescence made the route almost natural. In minutes, they were on the saw ground in the neighbor's yard, running towards the car. "Where are we going now?" she asked as Theo accelerated down the street. "To the only place where we can decipher these coordinates safely," he replied, his eyes fixed on the road. "The old observatory." "Why there?" "Because that's where your mother used to work before joining the Sullivans. And because," he cast a significant look at the necklace she was still holding, "those patterns aren't just common geographic coordinates. They're celestial coordinates." Olivia examined the necklace with new eyes. The patterns that before seemed merely decorative now revealed a mathematical complexity she hadn't noticed. Her mother, always fascinated by astronomy and mathematics, had transformed the necklace into a kind of coded map. "What exactly did your mother discover, Olivia?" Theo asked, his voice mixing concern and admiration. "What secret was so important to transform a simple necklace into a key to something bigger?" I don't know, she replied, her fingers tracing the patterns on the pendant. But I have a feeling we're about to find out, and something tells me the answer will change everything we thought we knew about our families. What they didn't imagine was that, at that exact moment, other people were also coming to the same conclusions. The cat and mouse game was just beginning, and the next move could determine not just their fates, but the future of an empire built on secrets buried for decades. The old observatory was practically abandoned, its facilities preserved only for historical purposes. The Art Deco building, with its characteristic dome, housed equipment that had long since been replaced by modern technology. But for Isabella Parker, this place had been a sanctuary. Your mother spent years here, Theo explained as they circled the building towards a side entrance. She developed a unique celestial mapping system that caught my grandfather's attention. The old lock easily yielded to Theo's skills. The interior of the observatory smelled of old books and oxidized metal. The late afternoon light entered through the high windows, creating geometric patterns on the marble floor. "How do you know so much about my mother?" Olivia asked as they climbed the circular staircase towards the main room. "I spent the night researching. Isabella Parker wasn't a simple secretary. She was a brilliant mathematician who developed a revolutionary method of cryptography based on astronomical patterns." The main room of the observatory was dominated by a huge, antiquated telescope and several tables covered with star maps. On one wall, an intricate mural showed constellations connected by golden lines. "Here," Theo pointed to a specific workstation. This was her office. The desk still bore traces of Isabella's presence, notes in an elegant handwriting, complex diagrams that mixed astronomy and mathematics. Olivia touched the yellowed papers with reverence. "The necklace," Theo extended his hand. "Let's compare it with these maps." Under the specific light of the observatory, the patterns on the pendant seemed to come to life. Theo began to photograph each angle, projecting the images onto his tablet, and overlaying them with the old maps. "It's a code," Olivia murmured, her eyes catching familiar patterns. "Each constellation corresponds to a terrestrial coordinate." "But they're not common coordinates," Theo completed, his fingers dancing over the screen. "They're specific points along the coast, all connected to the Deep Waters project." A metallic noise from downstairs made them freeze. Footsteps echoed on the circular staircase. "Quick," Theo whispered, pulling Olivia behind one of the astronomical panels. "Don't make a sound." Richard Anderson emerged at the top of the stairs, accompanied by two men. His imposing figure contrasted with the decay of the place. "They have to be here," his deep voice echoed through the room. "The necklace is the key to everything. Without it, the auction documents are useless." Hidden, Theo and Olivia barely breathed. The necklace seemed to pulse in her hand, as if responding to the tension of the moment. "Sir," one of the men called, "we found something." On Isabella's desk, they had discovered Theo's recent notes. Richard examined the photos on the abandoned tablet. "Sullivan," he growled, "always interfering. But this time, a cruel smile crossed his face. This time we have the advantage." He took an envelope from his pocket, leaving it on the desk. "A message for our hidden friends. They'll understand when they find it." After a few agonizing minutes, the footsteps moved away. When they finally emerged from their hiding place, Olivia ran to the desk. The envelope contained a single photo, her father tied to a chair with today's newspaper beside him. "No," she felt her knees weaken. "They got him." "It's a trap," Theo said, holding her shoulders. "They want to force us to hand over the necklace." "I don't care. It's my father, Theo. I can't abandon him." "And we won't," he assured, his green eyes fixed on hers. "But first we need to understand exactly what this necklace reveals. It's the only way we have bargaining power." With trembling fingers, Olivia turned her attention to the maps. The constellations on the necklace formed a specific pattern that aligned with points along the coast, exactly where the Deep Waters project had been planned. "Wait," she pointed to a specific notation in her mother's diagrams. "They're not just coordinates, they're dates. Each position corresponds to a specific celestial alignment. And the next alignment is..." Theo quickly consulted a program on his cell phone. Tonight, in less than 3 hours. What happens in this alignment? I don't know, Theo replied, putting away his cell phone. But your mother believed it was important enough to hide in a code that could only be deciphered here, in this specific observatory. A distant noise alerted them again. More people were coming. We have to go. Theo grabbed only the essential. Documents. We need to get to the marked point before the alignment. And my father? Trust me. He held her face between his hands. We'll save him. But first, we need to find out what secret was so important for your mother to hide this way. What truth was powerful enough to risk everything she loved? As they quickly descended the back stairs, Olivia pressed the necklace against her chest. In a few hours, the sky would reveal a secret guarded for 2 decades. A secret for which her mother had sacrificed everything and which now threatened to do the same to her. The sun was beginning to set when Theo and Olivia arrived at South Marina. The place, normally bustling, was strangely deserted. Only a few security lights illuminated the piers extending over the dark waters. The coordinates point to that area, Olivia indicated, consulting the calculations they had made. The necklace around her neck seemed to pulse with its own energy under the twilight. Theo parked the car discreetly behind an abandoned warehouse. We have 40 minutes until the alignment. He checked his watch. We need to find the exact point. As they walked among the piers, Olivia noticed that each structure had a specific numbering. Consulting her mother's notes again, a pattern began to emerge. Theo, look at this. She pointed to a sequence of numbers. They're not just astronomical coordinates, they're specific pier numbers, aligned with the constellations at precise moments. The sound of an engine cut through the night. Flashlight beams began to sweep the area. They followed us, Theo muttered, pulling Olivia behind a container. Richard wouldn't leave this place unprotected. Pier 23, Olivia whispered, her finger tracing a line on the improvised map. That's where all the lines meet. Crouched in the shadows, they watched 3 armed men with flashlights approach. Theo waited until they passed, and then silently guided Olivia through an alternative path between the warehouses. Pier 23 was the oldest in the marina, its wooden structure creaking softly with the movement of the waves. As they reached its end, Olivia noticed something strange in the pattern of the boards. There's a pattern here. She knelt down, her fingers tracing almost invisible lines in the weathered wood. The same symbols as on the necklace. Theo checked his phone. 15 minutes until the alignment. What exactly are we looking for? My mother always said that the true beauty of mathematics lies in hidden patterns, Olivia murmured, more to herself than to Theo. Her fingers continued exploring the markings on the wood. In how numbers can reveal... A soft click interrupted her speech. Under her fingers, a section of the pier had moved slightly. A hatch, Theo observed, helping her lift the disguised cover. Your mother turned the pier itself into a safe. The revealed cavity was small but well constructed, protected from water and perfectly preserved. Inside was a metal box, sealed, with the same geometric pattern as the necklace. Voices were approaching. The flashlight beams were getting closer. Quick, Theo urged, helping Olivia remove the box. The sound of footsteps on the wooden pier made them freeze. Richard Anderson emerged from the shadows, accompanied by his men. Impressive, he commented, clapping softly. I knew you'd lead us here. Now the box, please. Your father is eager to see you again, Miss Parker. Don't hand it over, Theo stood in front of Olivia. He won't hurt your father. Not while he doesn't have what he wants. Oh, but I already have what I want. Richard smiled, gesturing to his men. You did all the hard work, now I just need to... His words were interrupted by an impressive phenomenon. The celestial alignment had begun, the moonlight reflecting, at a specific angle through the necklace's pattern, projected a series of symbols onto the surface of the box. It's an opening code, Olivia realized, her fingers moving quickly over the metal surface. The necklace wasn't just a map, it was the key. The box opened with a soft hiss. Inside were a flash drive and a letter addressed to Olivia. It's over, Richard. Theo's voice sounded dangerously calm. The evidence Isabella gathered is all here, about how you and other executives defrauded the original concessions, about the true owners of these lands. I don't understand. Richard stepped forward, his expression hardening. This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. What's buried under these waters? The sound of sirens cut through the night. Lights from multiple vehicles began to illuminate the marina. Oh yes, Theo smiled, taking his phone from his pocket. I forgot to mention that I activated the emergency tracker when we arrived. The federal police are very interested in talking to you, Richard. Richard's face contorted in fury. For a moment, it seemed he was going to lunge forward, but the sound of approaching helicopters made him retreat. This isn't over, he growled, before turning and disappearing into the shadows along with his men. Olivia barely registered the confusion that followed. The sirens, the police officers, the lights. Her eyes were fixed on the letter in her hands, on her mother's familiar handwriting. Your father is safe, Theo informed, hanging up his phone. The police found him at Anderson's summer house. Richard was bluffing, he would never harm such a valuable hostage. But Olivia barely heard him. With trembling hands, she opened her mother's letter, knowing that the words contained within would change everything she thought she knew about her family and the Sullivan Empire. Dear Olivia, if you're reading this letter, it means you've managed to decipher the codes I left and arrived here at exactly the right moment. I always knew you inherited my passion for patterns and numbers. It's part of our legacy, greater than you can imagine. What I discovered during my work for the Sullivans changed everything. The Deep Waters Project lands weren't just an area for real estate development. They were part of an old concession given to your great-grandmother, Elena Parker. She was a brilliant scientist who discovered something in the depths of these waters, something the government of the time wanted to keep secret. Elena was forced to sell her lands for a pittance, but before that, she hid all the evidence of her discovery in a place that could only be found through the astronomical calculations she loved so much. I found her diaries, Olivia. What she discovered in the depths of the sea could revolutionize the way we generate energy. A clean and practically infinite technology. Anthony Sullivan discovered this through old documents. That's why he hired me. Not for my skill with numbers, but because I was a Parker, and he suspected that Elena had left clues that only someone with our blood could decipher. On the flash drive, you'll find all the evidence, the original concession documents, Elena's diaries, evidence of the frauds committed to take our lands. But most importantly are the exact coordinates of Elena's discovery site, the secret that Richard Anderson and others have tried to steal for decades. Daughter, if you're reading this, I probably couldn't complete what I started, but you can. The Sullivan Empire wasn't built just on strategy, it was erected on secrets stolen from our family. Theo may not know this. Anthony always protected his grandson from the darkest truth of his legacy. There's something else you need to know. Anthony Sullivan and I, we fell in love. It was an impossible love, complicated by secrets and lies. He wanted to fix the mistakes of the past, return what had been stolen from our family. But Richard and other executives discovered our plans. The money I received before disappearing, it wasn't a bribe as they wanted it to appear. It was for you to secure your future while I tried to fix our mistakes. Anthony promised to protect you, to ensure you had a chance to discover the truth when the time was right. At the bottom of the sea, near the coordinates I left, there's a time capsule that Elena hid. Inside are the original plans for her technology, and something else, something that proves the Sullivans aren't the only legitimate heirs to this empire. You're stronger than I ever was, Olivia. You have Elena's intelligence and a strength all your own. Use it wisely. The truth you now possess is a powerful weapon. Use it not to destroy, but to rebuild. And as for Theo, he's different from his grandfather. I see in his eyes the same search for justice that I saw in Anthony years ago. Perhaps you two can do what we couldn't, unite our families and fix the mistakes of the past. Forgive me for leaving without explanation. Every day, away from you was torture, but it was the only way to keep you safe while I gathered the necessary evidence. Now the future is in your hands. With all my love, Mom. P.S. The coordinates on the flash drive can only be accessed using your DNA as a key. Elena was indeed brilliant. She ensured that only a true Parker could claim her legacy. Olivia let the letter fall, her hands trembling. Beside her, Theo was pale, his face a mask of shock and understanding. "My grandfather," he murmured. "He knew about all this." "It seems he tried to fix things," Olivia responded softly, "with my mother. And now it's up to us to finish what they started," Theo completed, his eyes meeting hers with a new intensity. "Together." The flash drive weighed in her hand like lead. Somewhere in the depths of those dark waters, her great-grandmother's legacy waited to be discovered. A secret capable of transforming not just their lives, but the future of clean energy in the world. "We need to act fast," Theo said, observing the lights of the police cars still surrounding the marina. "Richard may be temporarily contained, but there are other players on this board, powerful people who won't want this truth to come to light." Olivia pressed the necklace against her chest, feeling the weight of 3 generations of Parker women on her shoulders. "Where do we start?" "At the beginning," Theo smiled, that smile that mixed danger and promise. "We need to pay a visit to my grandfather. I think it's time for a long-overdue family meeting." The Sullivan country house was an imposing construction on a mountainside, surrounded by a meticulously maintained garden. Anthony Sullivan awaited them on the terrace, his stately figure contrasting with the rising sun. "I was wondering how long it would take you to get here," he said, his eyes fixed on Olivia. "You're identical to your mother. You knew I would come." It wasn't a question. "Isabella planned everything down to the smallest detail," Anthony replied, gesturing for them to sit. "The necklace, the observatory, the coordinates, she left nothing to chance." "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Theo demanded, his voice tense. "About Elena Parker, about what really happened." "To protect you, my grandson. Some truths are too heavy to carry alone." Anthony sighed deeply. "When I discovered what my partners had done to get those lands, I tried to fix things. Isabella and I had a plan." "And that plan included abandoning a 12-year-old girl?" Olivia questioned, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "Your mother never wanted to leave," Anthony responded softly, "but Richard discovered about us, about the evidence we were gathering. He threatened you, Olivia. Isabella made the only choice she could. She disappeared to keep you safe." "And you?" Theo asked. "Why didn't you expose everything?" "Power is a funny thing, Theo. We think we control it, but in reality we are controlled by it. The moment I tried to act, I discovered I was as much a prisoner as everyone else." Anthony slowly stood up, heading to a side table where an old folder rested. "But now it's different. With Richard arrested and the evidence you found, we can finally fix the mistakes of the past." "Eleanor's technology," Olivia said. "Is it real?" "More than real," Anthony smiled. "She discovered a way to generate clean energy using deep ocean currents, something revolutionary for the time, and even more valuable today. That's why Richard was so desperate to find that capsule," Theo concluded. "Him and others. There's a whole consortium of companies that profit billions from dirty energy. Elena's discovery threatened all of that." Anthony opened the folder, revealing old documents. "Here's everything I've kept over these years. Records, evidence, names. Use this wisely, Olivia. You are the true heir to this legacy." "It's not just about inheritance," she replied, touching the necklace. "It's about doing the right thing. Like your mother." Anthony smiled sadly. "She too always chose the harder path, if it was the right one." "Where is she?" Olivia asked, the question she had held for 20 years finally escaping. The old patriarch hesitated, his eyes filling with unshed tears. "Safe, that's all I could ensure, but now perhaps it's time for her to come home." Theo approached Olivia, holding her hand. "We won't stop until we fix all of this. The Sullivan Empire can be rebuilt on new foundations." "It's already being rebuilt," Anthony observed, his eyes moving from his grandson to Olivia. "The two of you together, it's as if fate were correcting the mistakes of the past." The sound of a helicopter cut through the morning air. Anthony checked his watch. "Right on time, there's someone you need to meet." The helicopter landed in the garden, its blades stirring the carefully planted flowers. The door opened and a female figure emerged. Olivia felt her heart stop. There, 20 years older but still unmistakable, stood Isabella Parker. "Mom." The world seemed to freeze in that moment. mother and daughter looking at each other across 2 decades of separation, secrets and sacrifices, and between them, a legacy that could change the world. The embrace between mother and daughter lasted for 20 years of longing. When they finally separated, Isabella held Olivia's face between her hands, memorizing every detail. "You've become exactly the woman I dreamed you would be," she whispered. "Strong, determined, brilliant." "Why now?" Olivia asked, her voice choked. "Why come back just today?" "Because it's finally safe," Anthony answered, approaching. "With Richard arrested and the evidence in our hands, the danger has passed." Isabella took from her pocket a device that looked like a more sophisticated flash drive. "This contains all the data I've gathered over the last 20 years. Every suspicious transaction, every threat, every conspiracy to keep Elena's technology buried." "And the capsule?" Theo questioned. "At the bottom of the sea?" "It contains the original designs," Isabella confirmed. "But more importantly than that, it contains the final proof, Elena Parker's will legally recognizing her partnership with the original Sullivans, a document that makes Olivia the legitimate heir to half of everything." Theo smiled, squeezing Olivia's hand. "So we don't need a corporate merger to unite the families?" "No," Olivia returned the smile, "but maybe it's a good start." The following months were of intense transformation. Elena's technology was finally recovered and patented. The Sullivan Empire was restructured, with Theo and Olivia jointly assuming leadership of a new era of clean energy. Richard Anderson and his accomplices faced justice. The illegally acquired lands were returned to their original owners, with fair compensation. The Deep Waters Project transformed into the largest renewable energy research center in the Southern Hemisphere. Isabella resumed her place in society, now as director of the new Eleanor Parker Institute for Sustainable Technology. Anthony, finally, free from the burdens of the past, dedicated himself to social projects, using his influence for environmental causes. On a quiet afternoon, 6 months after the meeting at the country house, Theo found Olivia in the office they now shared in, the company presidency. She was admiring the sunset through the panoramic windows. "Thinking about how much things have changed?" he asked, embracing her from behind. "Thinking about how some things were destined to happen," she replied, touching the necklace she still wore. "Since that night at the auction. When a stubborn lawyer tried to resist my charms," he teased. "When an arrogant billionaire thought he could buy me with a bet," she retorted, turning in his arms. "And I ended up being the one bought." Theo smiled, kissing her softly. Soul and heart. Elena's necklace shone softly on Olivia's neck. No longer a container of secrets, but a symbol of a preserved legacy. The constellations engraved on its surface now told a new story, not of separation and losses, but of reunions and new beginnings. On Olivia's desk, a recent photo showed the whole family gathered, her and Theo, Isabella and Anthony, her father, and even old Mrs. Carmen from the archive, who had been a key piece in keeping the documents safe for so many years. A family formed, not just by blood, but by choices, sacrifices, and above all, love. "Ready for the press conference tomorrow?" Theo asked. "The announcement of the new technology will change everything." "Ready," Olivia replied. Elena would be proud. Finally, her discovery will help the world, exactly as she dreamed. The sun finally set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. It was the end of a day, but for Olivia and Theo, it was just the beginning of a new journey. A journey that had begun with a night, an auction, and a mysterious necklace, and that now unfolded into a future as bright as the stars that Elena loved so much to study.